The Supreme Court stands as the ultimate arbiter of American law, shaping the nation's political and economic life. When the executive branch takes bold action, it's often the court that defines its limits. This dynamic was tested during the Trump administration's aggressive use of tariffs, igniting legal and economic debate. The core conflict: does the president have broad authority to impose tariffs for national security, or does that power belong to Congress? The Trump tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Chinese goods marked a dramatic shift in U.S. trade policy, prompting immediate legal challenges. Businesses and states argued the tariffs were an unconstitutional overreach, causing economic harm. The Supreme Court was forced to interpret statutes delegating trade authority to the executive, weighing the balance of powers. This wasn't just about tariffs. It was about the structure of American governance. The outcome would define the limits of executive action in a globalized world. For the administration, tariffs protected American industries. For opponents, they were reckless and harmful. As legal battles escalated, all eyes turned to the Supreme Court. Its ruling would set a precedent for the separation of powers for generations. Tariffs have long been a central, contentious tool in American economic policy. The Tariff Act of 1789 was among the first U.S. laws, raising revenue and protecting fledgling industries. Throughout the 19th century, tariffs divided the industrial North and agrarian South, shaping political battles. The Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate commerce and set tariffs, a power it guarded closely for much of U.S. history. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930, which raised tariffs on thousands of goods, is blamed for worsening the Great Depression. After World War II, the U.S. led a shift toward free trade, institutionalized through GATT, and later the WTO. To adapt to global trade, Congress began delegating some authority to the president, passing laws like the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Section 232 of that act allows the president to impose tariffs if imports threaten national security. For decades, this power was rarely used. The Trump administration's broad application of Section 232 to common goods from allies was unprecedented and controversial. This novel use of executive power set the stage for a major legal challenge. At its heart, how much trade authority can Congress delegate to the president? The Trump administration's trade policy marked a sharp break from decades of bipartisan support for free trade. Trump's America First approach saw global trade as unfair, blaming it for lost jobs and declining manufacturing. The administration withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and renegotiated NAFTA. Most disruptive were the sweeping tariffs. In 2018, citing national security, the administration imposed 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum, even on close allies. It also targeted China, imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions in goods, citing intellectual property theft and unfair practices. China retaliated, sparking a trade war that rattled global markets and U.S. businesses. The administration argued tariffs would protect American industries and force fairer trade. Trump embraced the tariff man label, insisting short-term pain would yield long-term gain. But the aggressive, unilateral approach alienated trading partners and much of the U.S. business community. Legal challenges mounted, questioning the president's authority. The administration's confrontational stance set up a direct clash with the courts. The fate of U.S. trade policy and the limits of executive power hung in the balance. The Trump tariffs faced swift legal opposition from importers, manufacturers, and agricultural groups. Their core argument: the president exceeded authority delegated by Congress, especially under Section 232. They claimed national security was used as a pretext for economic protectionism, not genuine threats. Challengers argued this usurped Congress's constitutional power over commerce. Another key point, the non-delegation doctrine, which says Congress can't hand over its legislative powers without clear limits. If Section 232 allowed such broad discretion, they argued, it was unconstitutional. Most cases landed in the U.S. Court of International Trade, which was hesitant to second-guess presidential national security judgments. Lower courts cited precedents granting the executive broad deference in these matters. Ultimately, only the Supreme Court could resolve these profound constitutional questions. The stage was set for a landmark decision. The Trump administration's legal defense rested on broad executive power and deference in national security. They argued the president acted within authority granted by Congress, specifically Section 232. National security, they said, was meant to be broad, covering not just military threats, but also economic vulnerabilities. Protecting domestic steel and aluminum was, in their view, a legitimate national security goal. The administration cited Supreme Court precedents urging courts to avoid interfering in executive foreign policy decisions. They insisted it wasn't for judges to second-guess the president's national security determinations. On the non-delegation issue, they argued Section 232 provided clear procedures and limits, an investigation, findings, and deadlines. These requirements, they said, guided and constrained the president's actions. A ruling against them, they warned, would upend decades of delegated authority and disrupt the balance of government powers. The administration urged the court to uphold the president's discretion in trade and national security. The tariff's economic impact was immediate and uneven. The administration touted gains in steel and aluminum jobs, but most U.S. manufacturers faced higher costs. Many businesses passed these costs to consumers, raising prices. Studies showed a net loss of manufacturing jobs and reduced economic output. Retaliatory tariffs from China devastated American farmers, especially soybean producers. The government spent billions in aid to offset farm losses. Analyses found the tariffs' costs were mostly borne by American consumers and businesses, not foreign exporters. The disruption created uncertainty, stalling investment and growth. The Supreme Court approached the tariff dispute with a wealth of precedent on executive power and trade. The 1936 Curtis-Wright case established broad presidential authority in foreign affairs, a key argument for the administration. Challengers pointed to Youngstown, 1952, where the court limited presidential power even during national emergencies. Justice Jackson's framework from Youngstown: presidential power is strongest with Congress's approval, weakest against its will, and uncertain when Congress is silent. The court had to decide, did Section 232's delegation resemble Curtis-Wright's deference or Youngstown's limits? Challengers argued using national security to justify tariffs on allies was an overreach. They urged the court to enforce the separation of powers and prevent executive usurpation of Congress's trade authority. The justices faced a pivotal choice between deference and constitutional limits. The Supreme Court's deliberation was a careful balancing act. Some justices questioned the administration's broad definition of national security, fearing unchecked executive power. Others noted Congress had delegated this authority and hadn't acted to reclaim it. The majority opinion, in a narrow 5-4 decision, avoided a sweeping constitutional ruling. The court held that the president's actions didn't violate Section 232's text, and courts couldn't second-guess national security judgments. However, the opinion emphasized Congress's power to constrain the president by amending the law. The decision left the ultimate responsibility with Congress. The separation of powers debate was far from over. The Supreme Court's decision affirmed broad presidential authority to impose tariffs under Section 232. It was a legal victory for executive discretion in trade and national security, but a setback for businesses seeking relief. The ruling highlighted the tension between presidential power and Congress's constitutional role in commerce. The decision gives future presidents a potent tool in trade negotiations. If Congress wants to reclaim its authority, it must act through new legislation. The ruling sets the stage for future political battles over trade and executive power. The question remains, will Congress reassert its constitutional role, or has the balance of power shifted permanently to the executive? The future of American trade policy and the separation of powers hangs in the balance.